intro.
A fighting fury, we're from Tigerland. In any weather you will see us with a grin, risking head and skin. If we're behind, then never mind, we'll fight and win, for we're from Tigerland. We never weaken till the final siren's gone.
I'm sorry, Jonty, you didn't want to have to hear that. I apologise, but it's just the button, and it's attached to the Go Live button. But good evening, everybody. Welcome to a very special show. We are, 9 days out from the draft. Thank goodness it's almost here. So when we get this close, we start to wheel in the heavy hitters of the draft world, and we've got a very special guest tonight, AFL draft analyst for Craft of the Draft and Zero Hanger, Jonty Ralphsmith. Welcome to the show. Thanks for jumping on.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, like you said, exciting times, 9 days out from the draft. Lots of whispers, lots of rumours. We all know the players' stories. Now it's just a matter of where everything's going to land next Wednesday night.
And has this been one of the hardest ones for you and what you do in your line of work to try and place? It just seems like it changes. I don't think I've seen one mock draft or power ranking that's been identical.
Yeah, and I think what that's down to when you're talking the mock draft and the power rankings is down to a couple of things. I think it's down to the evenness outside of you've got your established sort of top 6 or 7, of which 4 are obviously club linked. And then after that, there is such an openness that you can have someone that speaks to however many industry sources and gets told one thing, and then you speak to, the same number of industry sources, another dozen industry sources, and you get told something quite different, because there is a little bit of a divide in where people are placed, just because it is so close between the back end of the first round, but then particularly once you get even further back than that as well. And because there is that expectation that clubs are going to go after list needs this year, that means that what a typical power rankings looks like. So you watch the footy all year and you go, he's the 5th or 6th best in the draft class. If you've got a club that doesn't actually need that type of player, then they might end up sliding down a fair way, particularly when you've got 4 clubs that possess the first 8 picks, and then you've got the academy boys there as well. And the fact that you've probably got the, I guess, divide means you end up at times having someone who you think is strongly linked to a club, but if a club ends up passing on them, then they might fall, not 1 or 2 spots, but with that list need dictating a lot of people's thoughts at this draft, as we expect, they might end up falling half a dozen spots or more.
And it's interesting hearing you talk about draft need, because on a lot of the videos that I do with the different sort of players I'll sort of put forward that we might take, as all the common ones, I guess, but a lot of the feedback is typically draft for best available, but I don't fully subscribe to that. You look at North Melbourne, who maybe sometimes drafted best available too often, and they've got a raft of the same type of player. And I think this year does fall into that needs category. So it's actually interesting to hear you say that. So all clubs, you reckon, are go down the needs path just based on the players available?
I think to a degree, I think West Coast clearly are going to take the obvious, Will and Dersma. Yeah. Could you say that Dyson Sharp maybe suits them better? He gives them a bit more sturdiness around the ball. I'm not sure. Maybe you could, and maybe he doesn't end up going pick 1 or 2 because they preference Cooper Duff-Tytler, or they preference Sullivan Roby. But outside of the very, very top end, I think the theme overall will definitely be list needs rather than best available.
Before we get stuck into the mock drafts or the phantom draft side of things, tell us a bit more about what you do, how long you've been doing it for, and I suppose what information you collate and vision that you watch to compile all of your lists.
Yeah, absolutely. Go around to Coates League games, usually a couple of Coates League games per weekend throughout the winter, and the under-18s national championships as well. Also watch, obviously, some interstate footy on stream and speak to people in the industry across all forms of talent pathway and people in recruiter and clubland as well, and obviously get the opportunity to I guess formulate my own opinions based on what I've seen, and then combine that with what I've heard to then provide an analysis of what I think is a club's best pattern forward. But also a big thing that I enjoy doing is probably getting the opportunity to tell players stories and connect fans with players and who they are, both on and off the field, well before the draft, to give them sort of an indication of players' characters. So yeah, Craft the Draft started up at the start of 2023. So this is the third full year doing it. First year in partnership with Zero Hanger, have been really supportive and definitely added a level of professionalism probably to the production side of things. And yeah, we do a weekly podcast that allows us to disseminate the information we've gained across the course of a week via watching footy and via speaking to people as well. And then, yeah, we also have an Instagram handle that's quite active, and obviously an editorial site where we write frequent stories as well about things that we've sort of stumbled across and are hearing about in the industry, and interviewing players too.
Yep. So you're well entrenched. That's a huge body of work that goes into it. So it's no wonder comments like this pop up saying that Jonty's by far the smartest guy I've seen when it comes to the draft stuff. So PD is across your work and loving what you do, which is good. Look, I'm going to address the elephant in the room before we get stuck into it, because I can see all the comments coming through on Josh Smiley. I think we're just best to wait, folks, until we hear from what the club says. I know Xander Maguire is pretty heavily respected, but his tweet didn't have context to it, and that's not a shot at him. He just would have reported what he was told. But we all know that Smiley's been training at the club for the last 3 weeks, doing a lot of running. Potentially, this could have been a scheduled off day, and it could have all been part of the program, and it might have been he's already recovering from something or have been sore previously. Like it didn't read like it's a new injury. If it is, it's a shame, but we'll wait and see how it pans out, folks. So I wouldn't lose our collective minds just yet. And Jonty's going to actually speak about Smiley a bit later on when we go through some power rankings and his thoughts on him. So we'll get to that as well, but I wouldn't panic just yet, folks. But with that said, we will get stuck into the power or the Phantom Draft. I've broken it up into smaller sections for you to walk through. So we've got picks 1 to 5. Now, I suppose we're best to read out as well that in this Phantom Draft as well, folks, Jonty has executed a couple of trades that have happened. So pick swaps that have happened. West Coast will gain pick 9 from Carlton for pick 13 and 34. Adelaide to gain pick 11 for a future first to the Blues. And the Bombers trade 21 and 27 for Gold Coast 18 and 36. So that's why you might see some clubs in different spots. And that's just because of some predicted trades. But with the first 5 picks, talk us through them. Who have you got going where and the rationale behind it all?
Yeah, I think West Coast, Willem Dersma, I think in a draft where there's so much unknown, what's probably known is that Willem Dersma has established himself as the best of the class. And I touched on this last week, and people were asking about a player like Dyson Sharp, who is so good at the contested side of his game. And the way I describe Willem Dersma is his strengths aren't necessarily better than someone like a Dyson Sharp's strengths or someone like a Cooper Duff Tytler's strengths, but what they are is they're more suited to the modern game. So I'm talking the athleticism, I'm talking the size of his frame, and I'm talking about the significant improvement he showed with his contested ball winning abilities and his ability to transition run. I think all of those is sort of where the game's heading, and Willem Dersma has all of that to a T. Dyson Sharp's strengths, and I'm using him just as an example, are arguably just as strong when you look at his ball winning ability and his strength, but the game's probably going away from those types of players when you look at the, I guess, plight of someone like a Tom Mitchell 7 or 8 years ago in Brownlow medal contention, obviously won a Brownlow medal, and his career's obviously come to an end, and part of that's injuries. But that type of player, even if you look at a Ned Long from a Collingwood perspective, there's probably room for one of them, not both of them in the team, and that was a big talking point at the back end of the year. So Willem Dersma to West Coast, Zeke Hewland, they bid on, West Coast bid on, Gold Coast obviously matched the bid. Cooper Duff Tytler to West Coast. He's one who is clearly viewed as the best tall in the draft class, so help West Coast build their spine. They've obviously got Jobe Shanahan up forward. They've got Jake Waterman as well, but he's a little bit older. Yep. Cooper Duff Tytler, next generation, alongside Jobe Shanahan, looks really strong. I think Dylan Patterson, who's got the most devastating kick and creativity in the draft class, gets bid on by Richmond. And then the Tigers take Sullivan Roby at pick 5 after, his fabled finish to 2025.
Is there any world in which Dersma doesn't go one? So the reason why I asked that is I think back to last year, and I guess that maybe at this point in time, it was probably Jagger Smith and Fino Sullivan that were maybe Smiley's probably fallen off a little bit by then. But I don't think Sammy Lawler was in that number one frame. He was kind of at that 5 and 6 mark. Do you reckon this is as locked as loaded as it gets, though, by way of a number one selection?
I think Willem Dersma definitely ends up at West Coast. And it would take a significant backflip, and it would be significantly unlikely because it's very rare for a bid to be put on at pick 1. Obviously, it happened it has happened before. It happened 5 years ago, but it is very rare. That's the only variable for me, is if West Coast wanted to make Gold Coast pay top dollar, then maybe he doesn't get the technical pick 1 tag, but it would take a significant turnaround, and he will still end up in Perth next year.
On the bidding piece,
sorry, I was just going to say that's just how big a gap that he's put on I think his contemporaries. Yeah.
On the bidding piece, I fully agree with you that it's very unlikely a bid to come in at 1. If it did, though, would the pressure then be applied to Gold Coast to be able to get enough points for Patterson if that come in not long after? Because they can't go into full deficit because they haven't got that first round pick. I think it's somewhere in the 600s. Would they be having to shuffle a few things around beforehand if a pick did come in at 1?
Yeah, they would. I expect they'd have plans Bs and Cs in place, some trades on the back burner that they'd be able to do in case there was a shock like that. What we do tend to see is clubs tend to be aware if a bid's likely to come. So they do have a little bit of time to prepare in advance. So it's not a case of them being caught off guard. Even the most closely kept secrets have a way of leaking and have a way of people finding out. So I think that clearly the two priorities for Gold Coast are Zeke Hewland and Dylan Patterson. The positive for them is that they've got 3 other boys that they are going to look to match a bid for as well, you'd assume, or at least 2. So what that means is if those 2 bids in the top 5 did come higher, they'd probably be able to match it by way of actually trying to get the points to match for those 2 later boys. And then they might have, an extended period from pick 2 to pick 10, 15 in the draft where they can then try to get some more points to match for Bo Adensall or Jai Murray, having used those points that they didn't expect to have to use to match for Hewland and Patterson, if that happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So the other points just shuffled down the order a little bit more, which is a shame because I'm kind of hoping that we might throw a cheeky bid Jai Murray's way. Cooper Duff Tyler, has he been incredibly difficult to place, or have you always maintained sort of top 3? Is there a world in which you can see West Coast overlooking him and him being available at Richmond's first pick?
Yeah, there is. West Coast have actually done a little bit of work on Marcus Krasnodemskis, another ruck from the Eastern Rangers, a little bit of a bolter basketball background. I don't think you take Duff Tyler and Krasnodemskis. So that's where that school of thought comes from, where I do wonder whether the Eagles might overlook him. He has been a tough one to place. Has he always been in my top 3? Yes. No, he hasn't always been in my top 3. He's always been in my top 5 in terms of a power ranking side of things, and he's been number 1 for a lot of the year. I think what's been really important from a Duff Tyler point of view is that he's developed that forward craft to his game, because taking a pure ruck at pick 3 when there's so many list needs is something that I think is a little bit dangerous, just because I think it's a position we've seen it with Brisbane in recent years get away with not necessarily having a premium ruck and still being able to win the premiership. I think there's other areas of the ground you have to prioritise, but what Cooper Duff Tyler showed in the second half of the season is that he's a game changer in a couple of different ways, not only in the ruck, but also up forward. So he has been tough to place, but I have always maintained that he's a top 5 talent.
And have you heard any whispers? Is anyone coming after Sullivan Roby? Richmond supporters are getting nervous that we may not get him. Here, Essendon could be keen. Melbourne could be keen. I'm sure there's a few people who are lining up.
Yeah, Melbourne's keenness stretches back as far as anyone's, I think. And Essendon are keen as well. So yes, what you said there is correct. I think if you're looking at best available, you're probably gonna, and seeing a comment about the 3 centimeter growth in the new ruck rules, absolutely that helps grip it off Tytler. But on Sullivan Roby, I think any of those clubs he suits and he's best available. And the only thing that I'd caution with Sullivan Roby, and he's a player I like, is that sometimes we do fall into the trap of, if a player strengthens their stocks so late in the talent pathway piece, as he has done in the last 8 or 9 games, we can get so enamored with what they can do and then overlook what they can't do, because they're almost like a bit of a mystery package. So that's the only thing I'd caution about with Sullivan Roby. But having said that, it's really hard to pick apart too many weaknesses.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, that's the top 5 wrapped up. We'll open it up now to the next 5 picks. So Richmond with the next pick, kicking it off with Sam Grill.
Yeah, so Sam Grill, I think I've said this a few times, but you obviously took Josh Smiley and Sam Lawler in last year's draft, 2 big-bodied midfielders to build that next generation of on-ball strength around. You probably need that speedy type to complement them. Sam Grill is precisely that. So I think he's one that's suited to the Tigers perfectly. You obviously got a really good look at Sam Grill as well when he was playing VFL for you earlier in the year. He played a couple of games and looked right at home at the level as well. He's a competitor as well to complement that speed. So, yeah, Sam Grill at pick 6. The one thing I'd say, and I think we talked about it off air just quickly, is that if Sam Grill isn't selected by Richmond at pick 6, he could slide a little bit, just because I'm not certain he suits the clubs that are next in the order. And this is where the list needs side of things starts to come into it. And then you've obviously got the couple of bids as well.
Well, so when you say slide a little bit, what range do you think he could slide to?
And then, teams. Yeah.
So do you think if you were Richmond, if you had a Richmond hat on, would it be enticing to split a pick to bank on him still being there to try and get an extra selection in the first round? Or is that still too risky?
I still think that that's too risky. Yeah. My answer would be no. It's still probably too risky. Just because that there are some clubs that view him so highly. But they at present they don't have any picks there.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. I'm worried as well that clubs aren't outwardly expressing their interest in him either. Just because we maybe have, others may not have, but they still might rank him quite high. Do you see him playing long-term as a midfielder, or do you see halfback, wing? Where do you sort of see his best position?
Yeah, I think he starts off halfback, definitely. He's got that line breaking. He's got that ball use that really suits the halfback line, and obviously that athletic profile as well. But yeah, I think long-term he's a midfielder. I think, when you look at what your premiership window is from a Richmond Tigers point of view, it's probably 2028, 2029, considering you're still a couple of years away from finals, maybe only 1 year with the new wildcard introduction, to be fair. But that's a different conversation. But and I think by that time, the midfield that you're probably wanting to look at is Grill, Smiley, Lawler. And then you've got a really good forward line with guys like Harry Armstrong, Tom Sims, Jonty Fall to pick from, Jasper Auger potentially as a small forward as well. We'll have a talk a little bit later about who Richmond can take with pick 38. And, Luke Traynor in the back line with a couple of other really good young guys. I think the back line's actually pretty well set deceptively. I'd be interested in your thoughts quickly on that, where the back line's at.
It's been our most solid part of the ground. It's interesting. Like, we obviously picked up Luke Traynor last year. He ended up spending quite a significant amount of time on the wing. I didn't mind it personally, but Uze has said that they definitely see him long-term as a defender. I guess there's been a lot of speculation about Xavier Taylor linked to us as well. But then the question marks still come back, well, how does he fit in? Nathan Broad has flagged that next year is his last season. And then Vlosten, I'm guessing, might have 2 or 3 years. So if we were to go as Xavier Taylor, it would be a future-proofing mechanism. And I think Taylor could play multiple positions as well in his own right. But to your point, it's probably it is our most settled part of the ground. And if it wasn't for them, we would have lost plenty of games by a lot more last year. So, yes, very, very thankful to have those guys down there. But it's just about getting the forwards up to speed because they're quite young. And the midfield just needs a bit of a shake-up where we're very one-paced, and that's why the attraction of Sam Grill is there, because rolling around Prestia, Taranto, Hopper is not ideal. It's not sustainable. It just can't be done. So, but if you look at the 2027, 2028 version of Richmond, if you can have a Lawler, Houghton, and Grill type mix-up going through there, that's a good bit of speed and skill.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. I think, and just to touch on Taylor, he was the third player that I considered for Richmond. In the end, I think I just decided that, from a list needs point of view, Sam Grill was just too enticing to pass up, but certainly been linked to him, and he's a Richmond supporter as well. So there's the romantic side of that. I've been asked here in the comments about my thoughts on the Grill comparison to Butters. I really like it. He's got that explosive speed. Butters has been described as the toughest player in the AFL. I don't know if he's won that award. He's certainly been described as being close to it. And Grill is quite similar with his competitiveness and toughness. So, I subscribe to that comparison for sure.
All right, number 7, the Lions with a bid.
Yeah, Dan Annable gets bid on by Essendon, matched bid clearly. He's led the Brisbane VFL midfield for the second half of 2025. That's how good he's been. He hasn't just been a part of a VFL midfield, which is a hard enough thing to do as a teenager. He's actually been clearly their best midfielder and a player that they sort of facilitate to give him the best opportunity to thrive. So to me, he's a long-term replacement for Josh Dunkley.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer match bid. Then you're backing it up with the Blues.
Yep, Harry Dean, another no-brainer match bid. It's just a matter of how you do it. There was some pick swapping from a Blues point of view just to help them not only match a bid for Harry Dean, but the one that'll come for Jack Ison a little bit later. Clearly the best defender, or the best tall defender in the class.
The Bombers 9 and 10. I actually really like that combo for them. That's a good haul.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I would like that for them as well. Sam Cumming and Dyson Sharp. Sam Cumming as that half forward, that is Isaac Heaney 2.0. He's been compared to a little bit under 18s All-Australian, can play through the midfield as well. And then Essendon's probably gotten rid of or have a couple of midfielders who are on the way out. Like I'm thinking of players like Ben Hobbs who have been delisted, Dylan Shield as well. So Dyson Sharp comes in and adds a little bit of sturdiness to that on-ball brigade. So I think both of those players suit the Bombers quite nicely.
Has Sharp been a tricky one to place? For me, I've been really fascinated with him across everyone's rankings and drafts, etc., because he was clearly the best performed player in the champs by far. But yet no one can seemingly work out or all agree on where he might fit. And I suppose to your point, your view might be more based on where the game's heading.
Yeah, I've consistently had Sharp at the lower end of his consensus or potentially even lower than what the consensus range is, just because I just don't know how well the translation is with his leaning so heavily on his contested ball winning game, his inside game. He's not necessarily the cleanest of ball users. The reason I've got him here is 2 reasons. Or 3 reasons. He suits Essendon. His ball winning, or his ball use, has gotten a bit more efficient. We've seen that clearly across the course of 2025. And I think that ability to have a bit more of an impact on the outside of contest has been really significant as well. He's gotten forward, he's kicked some goals. We saw that at the champs in particular. But yeah, I think midway through the season, I wouldn't have used a top 20 pick on him just because of the old school nature to his play style, and the fact that it's a weak draft as well means, I guess, using pick 10 on him is to some degree a safe pick, because you kind of know what you're going to get at minimum. Whereas someone else might be a little bit more speculative. How do they translate to senior footy is always a question to ask. But Dyson Sharp's clearly got the hulking frame to do it quite seamlessly.
Yeah, he does. All right, we'll open up to the next 5. So kick us off from pick 11 with the Ds.
Yeah, they've been linked a little bit to Aiden Schubert. He's the one that I've got them taking. Tall forward. from South Australia. He said Dyson Sharp was clearly the best performed player at the national championships. I thought Schubert was clearly the second best performed player at the national championships. He held that forward line together. What was so impressive was he showed in every different game a little different facet to his forward craft, whether that was contested marking, his ability to chop out in the ruck, his ability to get high up the ground. But yeah, he's one that I really like for Melbourne. They need a key target up forward. They were using Jake Melksham as their key forward for the back end of 2025. They've got Luca Kentfield, who's untried in the VFL, who I'm a big fan of, but I still think they need someone. And then Xavier Taylor, one who is probably higher than 12 if you were to power rank the players. But yeah, I think he's one that could fall a little bit, and he suits Melbourne quite nicely, I would have said. Just, with that intercepting and rebounding run and carry and creativity off halfback.
I like that one for them, especially with, I suppose Stephen Maid towards the end was almost traded, I guess, and Jake Lever wasn't finding a consistent spot as well. You'd actually fit in quite nicely there. The Eagles with 13.
Yeah, and that was part of a trade. They've been linked a lot to Jacob Farrow. I think Jacob Farrow is either, if this trade was executed, which has been rumoured, then he'd end up at West Coast, so he'd stay local. A defender, really powerful midfielder as well. We saw that at the Champs. But if he wasn't taken by West Coast at number 13, or if that trade didn't materialise, and I think he'd end up at Hawthorn, would be my synopsis on Jacob Farrow at this point.
Do you read anything extra into him being invited to the draft night in the top 12? Is there a smoky or a sneaky chance he goes higher?
Yeah, there is a chance he goes higher. I still think his most likely range is sort of probably the 10 to 15 range, but there is a chance. I think it didn't surprise me that he was invited. I still think I still think these are the most likely clubs. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he's shown great promise. Came from a fair way back from a Western Australian perspective. At the start of the year, he wouldn't have been in their top. Oh, he wasn't in their state summer training hub, so that tells you how far back he's come from. He wasn't in their top 30.
Really? Okay. Wow. I didn't realize he wasn't in the top 30 then. Okay.
Yeah. Well, however many are in the training hub, which is about 30. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I can see him sneaking into the top 10. I don't know who to, but I can see someone. He's just got good skill, which I think is going to be really appealing, and then I think will eventually be a really nice midfielder. But he'll be one to watch on draft night. The Hawks are pick 14.
Yep, Xavier Lindsay. Sorry, Josh Lindsay is halfback. He was an interesting one to place because his range has always been top 10, edge of top 10. He's probably come back a little bit in the last few weeks, and it's just been, we all know he's got that weaponous kick, and he's probably the best ball user in the draft class if it's not Dylan Patterson. But it's just the question marks have persisted around, is his contest game good enough? Is his defensive application good enough? Is he athletic enough? But yeah, I think the answer to that is yes, and particularly the athleticism side of things. I mean, that's an issue. I think some of those other things he has shown some improvement in. And I think he suits Hawthorn. Hawthorn are a hard one in terms of what they need, but I think a line-breaking half-back that sets the game up suits them quite nicely.
I agree. I think someone like Lindsay would do well in an established side. I think he would slot in.
Yep.
He's the type of player you could see getting game time at some point in 2026 for them, despite them being well-established. I think he could crack into it. Pick 15. This one hurts because I really want Harley Barker to slip, but I don't think he's going to get to our pick in the 30s. I really like him.
Yeah, I did too. And I think Adelaide are a club that he suits quite nicely. Obviously, a local boy, but they probably they'd love a little bit of that speed and sizzle further up the ground. Unfortunately, the ACL injury ruled him out of the back end of 2025. But under 18s All Australian, what he did at the Champs was compelling, and he's a brilliant ball user.
He is. Someone's going to take, it's not even a risk, but someone's just going to take him knowing they won't use him for half a year and get him right for the back half of the year onwards. He's going to be a great get for whoever can land him.
Yep.
Then opening up the rest of the draft. So kicking off from pick 16 with the GWS Giants.
Oscar Taylor, he could get taken higher, Oscar Taylor for sure. And some people would say he's surpassed Josh Lindsay in terms of, those two are right next to each other and clearly both play that same position. Oscar Taylor's more athletic, more defensively accountable, and he's also got a very, very good kick on him. So arguably he's gone past Josh Lindsay, but I think it's very hard to see him getting past GWS because there's been a lot of talk in the industry in recent times linking him to the Giants, and suits their sort of run and gun style of footy quite nicely, I think.
It'd be a very good get. The Doggies coming in at pick 17.
Yeah, I think what they need is someone who is either a small defender, so like a line breaking type defender, or a front and center forward. And I've said this a few times because they've got Cody Waitman as that small forward, but he's not your traditional small forward at the foot of packs that's going to be kicking those front and center crumbing goals. He's more of that hit up. He likes to take a leap. He likes to take his marks as well. So someone at ground level who's really opportunistic, I think that's exactly what Lockie Doverston is. He's obviously, for people who haven't watched as much of him, he's been compared as that Nick Watson 2.0. So you think about some of the things Nick Watson's been able to do. I think Lockie Doverston's quite similar, and he probably comes into an AFL environment with even better pressure than what Nick Watson entered the AFL environment with at the start of 2024. So, yeah, I think he suits the Dogs list profile quite nicely, and this is certainly the range that I expect him to get taken in.
Could he go higher? Is it difficult to have small forwards go high, or could you see is Lockie in a bit of a different class where he's worth the risk?
No, I think he's certainly worth the risk. I think we saw Isaac Kako get bid on quite high last year, and obviously a talk about Nick Watson a couple of years ago. Phoenix Gothard, another one that springs to mind that went quite high. So I think small forwards are becoming more important. There's definitely a chance that he goes higher, and probably about 12-ish would be about the ceiling, I would say, for Lockie. Yeah.
The Crows coming in at 18 with another local boy.
Yeah. Jevon Philippou, I should say. Just a little bit out of sight, out of mind, maybe for some fans, because he missed the under-18s national champs. I'm a big fan. He is someone who is competitive. He's someone who is a very good kick, and he's got that fleet of foot as well. So a little bit like Sam Grill, it's probably that explosiveness that really stands out, but he's got that competitive underbelly to him too. And look at what Adelaide need. They probably need that in their midfield. They need it in 2026, really, and he won't offer it straight away, but certainly long-term he'll give them some good sturdiness alongside Sid Draper, who they picked up clearly last year.
I like Philippou. You've got a high ceiling and a lot of untapped potential. He'll be just a fascinating career to watch, to be honest. Pick number 19. This is probably the highest I've seen Pickett come in, to be honest.
Is it?
Is that a recent? Right. Yeah. Have you always had him up this high?
I've seen him linked to Melbourne. So, yeah, they've obviously got picks, which come in at 11 and 12 by the time you look at bids. Yeah. But he has been linked a little bit to Melbourne. Obviously, his cousin, Kasiah Pickett, is at Melbourne. So there's that side of things. I don't see him slipping too much further than the mid-20s. Small forward, some have him ahead of Doverston as the best small forward in the class. He's got a bit more speed than Lockie Doverston, and his X factor is really positive as well. Now, the consensus view is he's probably the forward taken after Lockie Doverston is off the board. But, yeah, he's certainly not that far behind him and has a little bit like what I said with Sullivan Roby, because of the way his journey is unfolded so late and because of how much untapped potential there is and how little time he spent in a high-performance pathway, there's that tendency and propensity to look at the positives more than pick apart the negatives. Yeah,
he'll be an interesting one to see how high he actually goes. Then you got a bid coming in for
every club. He's spoken to every club.
Okay, so that shows strong interest then, doesn't it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, even we could do another live wire small forward, but we just don't have the pick in the range to be able to do it.
Absolutely. Yep. We'll get to that when we talk about your pick 38, I reckon. But yeah, no. Harry Kyle, Geelong aren't shy of putting on a bid, and I think Harry Kyle's this is probably the ceiling of Harry Kyle's range. But yeah, what a story he is. I got the opportunity to have a chat to him at the AFL Draft National Combine. Wrote a story on him, but he grew up with a rugby union pedigree, I suppose, and basketball. He represented his state in basketball in year 6, so when he was about 12 or 13. But rugby union is the real skill set that shines through with his ability to navigate through traffic. Sort of draws defenders in, like if you can imagine rugby union, you're sort of looking to draw defenders in and then use your agility and your speed to evade around them. He does that when he plays footy as well, and it's quite a unique thing that you don't see very often. So Max King has been viewed for a long time as the best of the Sydney Academy boys in this cohort. There's now a school of thought that Harry Kyle's gone past him, so it wouldn't surprise me to see a bid on for him, and Sydney will match that bid. I think he's someone who has been compared to Finn Callaghan with his style of play, versatility, and size.
Yeah, geez, that'd be, if he evolves into anything like Finn, that would be a great get at that type of pick range. My goodness.
For sure.
The Cats, I like this pick, but I don't like it because I think he's going to thrive. Hibbins Hargraves is going to thrive at that environment in the Cats.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, Geelong and Freo, I think, are the two that have been really strongly linked to him. I think Geelong will pounce on him. He hasn't necessarily probably had the consistency in 2025 that he would like. Part of that's due to injury, but what you know about him is at his best, he is an absolute match winner. Yeah. I did a stats breakdown on him in last quarters across his Coates League career. 17 goals, 3 he's kicked in last quarters. So
wow.
And that's not to say every single one of those last quarters, the match is on the line. Sometimes the Stingrays are well ahead or well behind. But if you watch him, you'd understand that every time the match is on the line, he's someone that you want the ball in his hands. I actually had a chance to have a chat to Willem Dersma last Friday, and I asked him if there's anyone in this draft class you want the ball in his hands after the siren, who is it? And he didn't hesitate for a second, and he said Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves. And I think most people would echo that sentiment. So, yeah, Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves, a match winner. The downside, the difference between his best and his worst is probably bigger than anyone else's in the top 20 or so. But when there is potentially a shallower pool, maybe a little bit more likely to take a punt on someone who could have upside.
If he could have bridged that gap by like 20 or 30%, he could have been sort of top 10 calculations just on his match-winning abilities.
He was very much in that frame, and there's probably a little bit of conjecture still about where his best footy will be at the next level. I think it's off half forward. Spent a bit of time in the Stingrays midfield and can play wing as well, but playing as that half forward who delivers it inside 50 and can hit the scoreboard is I think where his best footy's played. Attractive
traits all round for any club. Then you got the Bombers with a match bid at 22.
Yeah, Adam Swade has been compared to Dion Prestia. I think he plays a lot of his career off half forward, so that strengthens their half forward line alongside getting Sam Cumming.
It's a no-brainer match for them. The Dockers with Blake Threadgold.
Yeah, they've been linked to him a little bit, and if you look at their defense at the moment, you're looking at a guy who is their skipper, Alex Pearce, and Luke Ryan are the two main pillars down there. They do have a couple of young guys there as well, but they're the two main guys when you think about a ball going into Fremantle's defensive 50. It's generally one of those two when they're at the best that are cutting it off. Yeah. So I think they've probably got to start to think beyond him. There is a school of thought that Blake Threadgold will go even higher than 23 and could go as high as the teens because of the fact that he's so far above the next best openly available key defender. Clearly, there's the consensus that Harry Dean's probably the best tall defender in this draft class, but he's tied to Carlton. So clubs might, if they see the key defensive side as a list need, might be tempted to take him a little bit higher than they otherwise would, because you're not getting Blake Threadgold, then there isn't a whole lot of other options for genuine tools in this draft class. He played on Mitch Marsh in the Sample Under-18s Grand Final and won best on ground. He actually played on Mitch Marsh, just a quirk of the draw, in 3 of his last 4 matches of the season. So that was the last round of the home and away Sample season, the first round of finals, and then the grand final. And speaking to both Blake and my colleague Mitch Keating, I think there was a consensus between the both of them that Blake probably got on top across the 3 games more so than Mitch got on top of him. But it was a really good battle nonetheless that they both emerged really well from. And I think that, as a tough and athletic defender, he's someone that's worth taking a punt on quite early. He finished in the top 10 for 3 separate testing events at the National Combine.
Definitely one to watch. I was actually talking about those exact same 3 games today because I was chatting to Louis Callaway.
Right.
And it was just fascinating, the results and how they swung. But the fact that West Adelaide only got 2 or 3 goals in their grand final probably suggests that, Blake did a good job when it mattered most, especially. Then rounding out the final selection, the Hawks, speaking of him, Mitch Marsh.
Yes, exactly right. One who flirted with top 10 and was certainly in some top 10 power rankings earlier in the year, slipped a little bit further back. I think consensually, this is probably the bottom end of his range, I guess you'd say, but I really think that he suits the Hawks. If they were to use this pick, there's a chance they trade it, because I think we all understand that the reason that the Hawks got these 2 first-round picks in was to try and lure Zach Merritt out of Essendon, and obviously not to use it at the draft. But if they were to take it to the draft, as I've got them doing, then I think Mitch Marsh is someone that, following the retirement of Jack Gunston, there's a clear replacement for him. Yeah,
agree. And he could even play on a wing. Some people have put forward as well. He's a beautiful user of the ball.
Absolutely, Yep.
He's like multi-positional. So, no, I think I've always felt that he would be a good match for the Hawks for the reasons you mentioned with the Gunston replacement. It seems pretty natural. It just seems to make sense. But there you go, folks. There is the first round, which is always interesting. There's always so many variations, but it's great to hear the reasoning behind the picks. Pick 38 for the Tigers is probably the other one I wanted to pick your brain about as well before we get on to the next power rankings. Now, that pick's going to come into about 32, 33 by the time all the other picks get consumed with the biddings and whatnot. I've never subscribed to – I don't think we're going to use that pick on Louis Callaway. I think we'll get him by just matching something else afterwards, and at worst going into deficit in the 3rd round, which would be not really impactful whatsoever to us next year. So I do think there's players available. Obviously, recently the Herald Sun linked us to Leon Kickett, and I did have the name Sam Allen come across my inbox today as well, which upon looking him up would be a fantastic fit, I reckon, from the Oakley Chargers, despite the fact that he's out with an ACL as well. But what names do you think could be on the radar for the Tigers for that pick in the 30s?
I'm glad you brought up Sam Allen, actually, because he's one I've got written down on my whiteboard here. I had a chat to Oakley's 2025 coach, Ash Close, last week about a few of their prospects, including Sam Allen. And I think the thing I took away from a Sam Allen point of view from that conversation was just his perspective and maturity. So the Oakley Chargers captain, but did so much to improve his footy and his mentality on and off the field during that injury. He was someone who approached it with great wisdom and improved throughout it. And I think he would suit Richmond because of his athletic traits. So he was the only player, he didn't test at the National Combine because of that ACL that you referenced, which he suffered after playing 8 games this season. So he played 4 games of Coates League, 4 games of Scotch College in the APS, and then suffered the ACL injury. At the Coates League preseason testing, though, he shone. He was the only player in the running vertical jump to leap more than a meter. So he was 101 centimeters was his jump. So really impressive. He's got speed. He runs comfortably a sub 6 minute 2 kilometer time trial, and there were many people that would have expected him to have taken that out over Jack Dalton had he run the 2 kilometer time trial at full fitness. So in terms of a next generation winger, he's probably the one you're looking at. The question mark over his game, the reason he's not talked about in a higher vein, because his ball use is really good as well, is we just never really saw the contest side of his game throughout 2025 or 2024, throughout his talent pathway journey. He's always been that hard running winger. I guess that's what you do when you've got someone that can run as well as what he can. The plan was for Oakley to showcase his midfield attributes throughout 2025. Unfortunately, he didn't get a heap of opportunity to do that because of the injury. But the little we did see of him as a midfielder forward, he was quite strong. And I think he's got the attributes to shine with, again, as I've referenced a couple of times, with the direction the game's heading and the athleticism side of his game. I think he's certainly one. A couple of others, you mentioned Leon Kickett. I think that would be a shrewd pickup because a small forward I think would suit you well. Jasper Alga, more of a medium hybridy forward rather than a clear small forward, which Leon Kickett is. And then just because I know there has been some work done on Xavier Taylor, and I didn't mock Xavier Taylor as going to Richmond, a couple in this range who you guys have spoken to and shown a little bit of interest in that play a similar position to Xavier Taylor, Max Kondogiannis and Avery Thomas. Max Kondogiannis.
Avery Thomas is interesting. His testing was through the roof as well, wasn't it, at the combine?
Yeah, well, how's this for you? He was really ill. I had a chat to him at the combine, and he was really ill for the week leading up to that combine. So he wasn't anywhere near full fitness, I guess, because of that illness. He'd lost a couple of kilograms in the lead-in. So, yeah, that tells you how impressive he might have potentially been had he been at full fitness. But he's got a decathlon background, so that's why he's got that athleticism. And,
okay, that makes sense. Because he was like top 5 or 6 in a lot of the categories.
In 3 or 4, I think. Yeah. The only one that he struggled in was the 2-kilometer time trial, which probably owes to that illness. You can sort of forgive that. But yeah, intercepting defender and takes the game on with his ball use. And Max Kondogiannis, similar sort of story. Oakley, he was Kerry Grammer's captain, great character. Can't speak highly enough of his character. And he was another one actually I spoke to at the National Combine, a little bit of a raw frame. So he'd be someone that you'd take and develop in the gym for 18 to 24 months, but certainly has the attributes from a ball use point of view and rebounding and intercepting side of things that could succeed at AFL level, I think.
That's interesting. A couple of extra names to ponder for our pick in the 30s. It'll be fascinating to see what we do with that. I hope we hold on to it and actually use it, because I think some of those players still do fit the need for us. Sam in particular, we need to sort out our wing positions in the next 3 to 4 years. And I think he could be a good shout there. Question from Dan. Have the days of picks over 30 to get a diamond out of the rough gone? Are the recruiters that good now that it doesn't happen? Or do you still think there's some diamonds in the rough to be had?
No, I still think there's some diamonds in the rough to be had. And I think what we'll find this year is that because there is such an evenness from, 25, 30 to sort of 70, and there's not going to be that many picks taken, but 70, 80, 90, it could mean that a player who's taken at pick 54, pick 55, one of the last picks of the night, is actually seen by a lot of clubs as being that, we actually had him closer to 30. We just didn't have a pick at that time, or we'd already used all our picks, or in the case of Gold Coast, they'd already, they needed to match bids, so they couldn't take a pick. But those days are certainly not over, just because of how tight it is from 30 onwards. So yeah, you could certainly see some late diamonds in the rough.
Hopefully we can all find one for our respective clubs. Yep. And Louis Callaway, what can you tell us about Louis? As I said, I was chatting to him today. I think he's a wonderful kid, speaks so well. Yep. I don't know whether I'm being Richmond biased or not, but I thought he had a super consistent year for Sturt and a really consistent chance performance as well. But keen to hear your views on Louis Callaway.
Yeah, he in a way, and he's a different player in a way, but there's a comparison for me to be made between Louis Callaway and one of my favourite players from the 2024 draft class who played a game of AFL this year at West Coast, Luca Grego. And the likeness that I'm going to make is that Luca Grego last year had a lot of fans who said actually, let me word this the other way. He had a lot of detractors that said he doesn't have a clear weapon. And I think that's potentially the case with Callaway. A lot of people are saying he's a solid footballer, but what do you know him for? You look at someone like a Willem Dersma, and I talked before about the athleticism and the speed and that side of things. You talk about Sam Grill, clearly you're talking about the line breaking. What is that that asset for Louis Callaway, that point of difference that sets him apart. And that was probably the question for Luca Grego last year. But then all of Luca Grego's fans went the other way and said he actually doesn't have a weakness. He's actually so balanced across the board.
Well.
Yeah, does everything, does everything potentially, you'd say 7 to 7.5 out of 10 without having a 10 out of 10. Whereas you'd have another player who has that 10 out of 10 weapon, like I talked about with Josh Lindsay's kicking, but then might have other elements of his game that, 5 or 6 out of 10. Louis Callaway is very similar to Luca Grego in that sense, where I think his contest stuff is really solid. I think his ball use is really solid. His defensive application is really good. His athleticism is quite sound without being off the page. Clearly his ball use as well. He's got the ability to hit his targets and make good decisions, but none of them are that thing that jumps off the page and sticks in your mind, a little bit like what Luca Grego was last year. He obviously found his way onto an AFL list, so hopefully Louis does too.
I completely agree with that assessment. And I said to him today, he doesn't necessarily take off those dangerous kicks, but he just makes the right decision, whether it's a handball out instead of trying to split a 45-meter kick that some other higher-end players will take off, and they might hit it 4.5 times out of 5. But I think he does a lot of things very well, and I think he'll be a more than handy footballer. I'm not sure where he fits in, if he was to end up at Richmond, where he fits in positional-wise at AFL level. I would assume he would start in the back line, obviously have to work his way into the team. His frame, and to your point, Zoran, he's been working on his frame. He has gotten a lot bigger since 2024, but he was talking today about he's still jumping on the bench press to try and increase his size and strength, which did help him this year. He was able to be a lot stronger in tackles and in contests. He's definitely aware that it's something he's got to work on. And I feel like maybe people who sort of just try and do mock drafts and things like that maybe don't pay as much attention to the linked players because it just feels like they're going to end up at the relevant club. So I sometimes feel like he's not got the love he maybe deserves in this particular draft, but I'm happy to get him for as cheap as possible. Yeah.
I think the other thing that is evident, having covered the whole draft for an extended period, is particularly this year, there is I don't want to say a stigma, but there is a sense that for whatever reason, players from South Australia in the mainstream media aren't getting the love that they perhaps deserve. So I know I spoke about my honest thoughts about Dyson Sharp, but there's clearly a school of thought that he should be a little bit higher. But some players like Blake Hood, Sean Benier, who was really consistent. Blake Threadgold, it took a long time for people to come on board with him. Jevan Philippou was another one that I spoke about before. Matt LeRae, certainly he was outside my first round, but he's inside a lot of people's first rounds. Probably hasn't been spoken about as widely, despite being an under-18s All-Australian. Noah Roberts-Thompson has spoken to double digits clubs. I don't think that's been reported on very widely. So for whatever reason, Zane Puker's another one from South Australia, who is a small forward, a powerful small forward as well. So, there is this sense, I feel like, when you're from South Australia, they don't seem to get reported on. Clearly, Victorians is the talent hotspot. Tassie gets reported on because there's only ever 1 or 2 from Tassie, and it means a lot to the state. The WA media does a good job of pumping up their kids, and then clearly the northern states are all tied to academies, so then their kids naturally get a little bit of attention. But for whatever reason, South Australia seems to be a little bit of a black hole for attention.
It's quite bizarre, isn't it, given how strong they were? Like, they were one of the strongest champs teams we've seen for some time as well. So it's not any surprise that their players are, highly regarded by AFL clubs, but a bit strange that it doesn't get reported on the same way. In terms of matching the bid for Callaway, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it comes after 38 or whatever that pick turns into, it would just be a case of using the token pick 81 that we have and going into deficit with our third round pick or whatever round it falls into, or would we need to trade in?
You'd have to go into deficit as a result of the fact that pick 81 has 0 points.
And it wouldn't be because you get the 10% discount. If the pick's coming in the 40s, we're talking it might be 50 to 100 points after it's all said and done. So it's not going to impact. Like, I think people worry about, will it impact our ability with our NGAs and father sons next year? I don't think it will. I don't think that type of impact is going to play too much havoc on that, because it's coming from the round that the pick's in. So it doesn't come off our first round pick. It comes off the relevant round.
Yeah. It comes off the relevant pick. Each pick has a different number of points. Yeah. And worth touching on Tanner Armstrong as well. Made the AFL Academy, which was announced publicly last week. And a really good prospect for 2026 as well as a really powerful, accountable sort of halfback, I think.
So I saw a question float through before with a bit of a comparison. How would you compare Tanner Armstrong and Grill? Will they end up being similar types of players? Is that then, how do you see both of them side by side?
Yeah, good question. I think Tanner Armstrong is probably a little bit more well-rounded in terms of that balance of strength and speed, whereas I see Sam Grill being more slanted towards speed, although he does have the toughness as well. It's probably more so the speed that he's known for, whereas my immediate thoughts about Tanner is a bit more balance and probably a bit more accountability when he's playing one-on-one off half-back. I think when Sam Grill's playing off half-back, is that line breaker, is that offensive type of player. I think he's got the capacity to become very good one-on-one because he's so competitive, but he's probably not as known for it at this stage of his career.
What about skill-wise between the two? Is there much difference between them? Is one a better ball user than another?
Yeah, I'd say Sam Grill's a better ball user at this stage, definitely.
I've felt this year in particular that the ball execution by foot for Tanner is one of the big things he's got to improve on for next year.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Otherwise, it could slide a little bit. What about, got any thoughts on Archie Daffy and Jack Lees, who are father-son prospects? I know not many people may have seen them play, but I thought I'd throw it out there anyway. Yeah,
no, I haven't watched as much of either of those two boys. Archie Daffy, I've heard some I don't want to say some raps on, but I've heard some people have some belief that he could be one that spikes a little bit next year. So he's one that I'll certainly watch with bated interest. But I can't say I've probably seen enough to be able to provide an assessment at this stage.
No, that's all right. The other fun exercise I asked you to do, because a lot of people have asked this question, that to put together a power ranking, we've done I think it was a top 16, but based on last year's draft and this year's draft. And to your point on email, I guess it does highlight there is a weakness in this year's draft, but it was just an interesting thing to undertake anyway, just to see where the names might fall. So I've brought it up there. Talk us through the rankings that you've gone with. So just again, folks, this is combining last year's players and this year's players to see what a power ranking might look like between the two, just to get an idea of where this year's draft class sits.
Yeah, so this is a power rankings of sorts. What's really important to preface is that with 1 year in the AFL system, I deferred to the order that the 2024 prospects were taken in, because I don't think it's fair to, for example, slide someone like a Josh Smiley off the board because he hasn't played at AFL level as a result of injury, or slide someone like a Murphy Reid up off the back of one good year, even though he does look like he's going to be a very, very good player. You want the longevity before you start to make significant changes to any draft board. The main thing to take out of this is that, out of the 16 players, I think there's only 4 that are from this year's draft class, and they are Willem Dersma, who comes in at number 6, Dylan Patterson at number 7. They're the ones that are a bit more of that transformative type of player, the ones that you can build a team around both on the field and off the field because of their skill set, and I guess to a lesser degree because of their personality. And then you've got Harry Dean at 16 as well, and Zeke Hewland at number 10. Zeke was hard to place because we've hardly seen him this year, but I did put him at number 10 just based on the raps he's got on him. And then Harry Dean at 16. Now, those aren't the top 4 players in my power rankings, and they clearly weren't the top 4 players in my mock draft either. But the reason that I've left Cooper Duff-Tytler out is because I think that in a stronger cohort of players, which last year's clearly was, you might be a little bit more inclined to let a tall slip, because talls have a skinnier strike rate of success at the top end of the draft than midfielders. So if I was drafting at the top end, I would be more likely to take a midfielder if there's a lot of those options available to me. And then Sullivan Roby, similar concept or similar school of thinking in that, yes, he's been a great bolter, but would I be tempted to use a top 3 or 4 pick on him next year when there's someone like a Willem Dersma, a Dylan Patterson, a Josh Smiley still available to me who are known quantities and have been for some time? So hence why I left him off the list. But he's one that, like we said, could in this hypothetical, could actually have attracted some attention just because of how quickly he rose. The one that was really interesting to compare was Alex Tarou and Harry Dean. I think they're very similar in a lot of different ways. I think Alex Tarou probably just has a little bit more upside just with that athleticism being through the roof. And I think we're only just scraping the what's the saying, Chris? Scraping the surface of his skill set. Yeah. I kept Alex above Harry Dean, but yeah, that's sort of the way I would go, and I think it just underlines the difference in strength of draft crop.
Now, we spoke about Josh Smiley a little bit off air and at the start of the show, just with the scare, I suppose, that come out. What can you tell us about your thoughts on Josh in his draft year? How did you rank him?
Yeah, I had him, and I probably maintain this to some degree until I'm proven wrong, and hopefully I'm not from a Richmond's point of view. I had him as the best player in the 2024 draft crop, as in I maintained all the way through. And I know there was a long period of time where he was in pick 1 contention, and then probably the last month or so of the season, the last 2 months, he fell out of that a little bit. But I still maintain that he's got the most significant upside of any player because of the blend of strength, the blend of physicality in the midfield, and the ability to use the ball better than I think what he's given credit for, and he can obviously go forward and impact as well. So I think there's so much upside with Josh Smiley that we just haven't seen yet. Just needs to get his body right.
I know it's been a little bit frustrating. I think that the one thing I've always thought is it's just an unusual prospect to have someone at that height running midfield kilometres at AFL level. Like, we're talking about a key forward size, essentially covering 15 or required to cover 15 odd K a game. So I guess there's a bit of a learning curve for him, and even for us as a club, I reckon, because you don't have those players come in all the time. And I guess someone like a Paddy Cripps took a couple of years before he was consistently doing well, but hopefully the setback's not too big of a setback. What about Taj Houghton? What did you make of Taj in his year?
Yeah, rated him highly. I think it was widely known behind closed doors probably that Richmond were really keen on him for an extended period of time. I think he's got the ability to be someone that a lot of clubs, particularly, clearly the clubs that were above Richmond before they picked him up, regret overlooking, because he's athletic. He's that sort of player that you love in the modern game. Like, he's a different build to Cam Rayner, but I think of some of the things that Cam Rayner does with his ability to really impact forward kick goals, but then go into the midfield, his explosiveness, his speed, that half forward that can then pinch it in the midfield with real energy and effervescence really stands out. And I think that, Taj Houghton's got all of the ingredients. And I think I was there when he made his VFL debut, his return from his ACL injury. It didn't take him long to look a class above. And it was good to see him get the opportunity at the next level this year.
I reckon that would have been the most watched VFL game for quite some time. There's a lot of people tuning in for it. He's hit the ground running today too in pre-season, which was good. Before we let you go, we'll get a couple of questions through. So if anyone's got questions, send them through. I did see a couple of questions come through about Fred Rodriguez. Before the start of 2025 was highly touted, sort of in the top 5, top 10 areas, and then now we're sort of seeing in that 30 to 40 rank. What have you made of his year, and what do you put the slide down to?
I put the slide down to similar to what I said about Dyson Sharp, and if I use some evidence to back up that Dyson Sharp, that big-bodied mid who doesn't have speed, who doesn't have X factor or versatility or ball use sort of going out of the game. I look back to 2023, George Stevens, AFL Academy captain, slipped all the way through to pick 66, pick 76, and Geelong pounced on him very late in the draft. I look back to a couple of players that were overlooked entirely. Mitch Zitkovsky was part of the was part of the AFL Academy in 2023. He didn't get drafted. He was touted as a top 5, top 10 pick as a big body midfielder. And then Will Brown as well was Vic Metro co-captain in 2023, didn't get drafted at all. Then I look at last year, Josh Smiley, slightly different case, but big bodied midfielder, ended up sliding a little bit. Dyson Sharp is another example this year. And I think Fred Rodriguez potentially fits a similar type of mold. He's not as big when you talk about big bodied midfielders, but he's still that same type of profile where he leans heavily on what he's able to do at stoppage and win contested footy, and then doesn't necessarily have as much balance as some of the other prospects. So that's why, because I think he's actually had a reasonably successful year. He took out WA's MVP and was quite consistent for South Fremantle as well. It's just probably the ball use and also the athleticism that are question marks. And I think in the modern game that those question marks are really make clubs hesitate.
And a question on, do you think there's going to be much trading, I guess, happening? The specific question on thoughts on pick 4 and maybe 38, a trade with Essendon 6 and 21. Do you see much live trading happening in these first handful of picks?
I'm just trying to get my head around the question. So that would mean Richmond end up with 6 and 21, Essendon with 4 and 38. Thing for Essendon to consider is making sure they have enough points to match a bid for both Adam Swade and Hussein Al-Ashkar. Without having considered this before, 21 to 38 seems a significant slide in terms of trying to match a bid. How many players do they want to get in alongside those two players? I know Essendon are trying to get up the board, and I think that's been pretty well documented. So, it's a trade I could see happening without having thought about it and looked at it forensically. It does make sense, provided that, the Essendon point situation all aligns.
Riley Onley is another name that was touted, was ranked pretty highly as well early on, and has sort of slid down, maybe in similar vein to Fred Rodriguez.
Yeah, similar vein to Fred Rodriguez. The thing I'd say about Riley is he was one that I was actually going to bring up, and then the conversation went in a different direction when you were talking about Josh Smiley and his size, because Riley only stands at 195 centimetres. So it's a similar thing that an AFL club's going to have to be very careful to condition him and build him up to play AFL footy. The difference, I'd say, between Onley and someone like Fred is that Onley runs a 20-metre in 2.88
quick
for
seconds.
A big guy. Really quick for a big guy. I don't have him in my top 50. He was very unlucky to miss. Some people have him as high as the early 30s. The reason I've got him a little bit later is I don't think he uses his size to impose himself on a contest consistently enough. I think he's a big-bodied midfielder that plays like a non-big-bodied midfielder. So I think
so he just needs to bash and crash more.
Yeah, correct.
Now, you mentioned about the Bombers looking to trade up. Who do you think they're looking to trade up for? Who do you think their ideal target is if they shift up the order?
Cooper Duff-Tyler. Yeah, that would be the answer. I mean, there's no secret that I'm pretty sure it's pretty widely reported that they were looking to try and find a way to bring in Willem Dersma. But that would require them trading for pick 1, and I just don't see that happening now.
It doesn't happen, does it? Yeah.
No, but that was the initial school of thought when the reports initially surfaced about Essendon trading up. Now it's Cooper Duff-Tyler because they are really keen on him. They got a good look at him when he played Essendon VFL, and he's someone who, if they see him as a forward, he complements Nate Caddy and Archie May quite well, because Nate Caddy's a little bit smaller. And Archie May probably plays a little bit deeper, and I think Cooper Duff-Tyler's ability to cover the ground is really impressive. And if they see him as a ruck, well, I think that there's certainly the opportunity for them to bring in a young ruck with Sam Draper going to Brisbane, Todd Goldstein moving on as well, and I'm not sure, is Nick Bryan the one that you want to build your next generation around? I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah.
All right, the last one, I'll pop this question up. I'll bring up the first round as well of the draft. Just if anyone else has just tuned in, you can see what the first round draft looks like. But the question is, what do you project Sullivan Roby to be at AFL level? Is he a McCluggage type, a DeGoey type? And what do you think Sullivan Roby's best position could be?
I think he's a DeGoey type. He models his game on a combination of, having spoken to him, Jordan DeGoey, Hugh McCluggage, and Dustin Martin. So I think the humid luggage element that he studies is really important because of the type of player he is probably more of, and he's spoken about his comfortability playing as that connecting high half forward that delivers the ball inside 50, that is able to get up to contest as an extra number and be really impactful. So that's where I see him playing. And clearly he kicks goals as well, and he's a really dangerous forward threat on the ground and in the air. But yes, I would say the closest comparison is probably a Jordan De Goey.
That's my biggest thing with him. It's his aerial threat up forward and his actual goal kicking ability. It's such a big string to his bow, and it's why I think it's such an appealing prospect for a few clubs at the top end of the draft. But Jonty, thanks so much, mate, for jumping on tonight and sharing all of that. Thorough, in-depth, amazing work, and I'm sure everybody loved it. And I guess what's always good about this stuff is it's always a different lens, a different view, and there's so many ways that this draft can play out, and it was just fascinating to hear the way you think it might come out. But do you have a mock dropping before the draft hits?
Yes, we will. We'll have a top 40 dropping on Zero Hangers YouTube channel on Thursday at 5 p.m. So yeah, tune into that, and that'll provide similar thoughts, I guess, about the first round, but a little bit extended as well with the next 16 picks and how they could all land.
There you go. I'm sure there'll be stuff coming through on the Craft of the Draft Instagram as well, with some different rankings and things like that as well. Will there be?
Yeah, there will be. Going to have a chat to Marcus Krasnodamskis, a bolter from the Eastern Rangers, in a couple of days. Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves, another one. So, yeah, some player interviews coming up, and also no doubt plenty of intel across the next 8 or 9 days as we try and make sense of what's going to happen from November 19.
Sounds good. Well, enjoy the next 2 weeks and all the work involved. Make sure everyone gets around the channels. Zero Hanger, obviously everyone all knows, but Craft of the Draft, make sure we get around to give it some love. Keep an eye for all the information dropping on all things draft related. Jonty, thank you again for dropping by tonight. Appreciate it. And yeah, good luck for draft night, I guess, with all the work you'll be doing.
No worries. Appreciate it. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all.